video, we're going to configure PAT on our ASA firewall. So here's what we're going to do in this particular video that we talked about in the presentation video. We're going to configure our guest network to use the IP address configured on our WAN facing interface for accessing the internet. So this is what we call one-to-many. That's what PAT does. So how do we configure that on the ASA? Now we can configure it using network objects or using a Nat Rule or twice Nat as what it's called. So basically this requires a network object. So configuring PAT is very easy. Let's get started. First we need to go to configuration, firewall, and then to Nat Rules. Here we're going to go towards the right and go to add and then select network object. Here we're going to specify the name, which would be guest-net. For the type, we will select network, and we'll input the network for our guest, followed by the appropriate subnet mask, which is a class C. Now we're going to extend the NAT configuration, and we're going to enable NAT. Here, for the type, we're going to select the dynamic PAT hide. For the translated address, we're going to click here and select the WAN interface. This means using the IP address that is configured on the WAN. Once we're done, we'll click on OK. Let's go ahead and apply the changes and save. And this basically is how you can configure PAT on the ASA firewall using the network object. Once we have finished with our PAT configuration that allowed our guest network to be translated using the IP address configured on our WAN interface, which is the one-to-many NAT translation configuration, let's confirm that this is working. So we're on a laptop that's connected to the guest network, and of course we got our IP address via DHCP. So we should have access to the internet. So let's just confirm that now very quickly in this video segment. So we're connected here, you can tell. Let's close this out. And here, let's try to ping an IP on the internet. Now keep in mind that the ping is going to fail because by default, there's no firewall policies for allowing ICMP echo replies. So this is normal. But if you open up a web browser, you can see that we can access msn.com perfectly. So we do have access to the internet. We can put in another website just to confirm that, like routehub.net. And again, we can access that site as well. So basically, we have confirmed that we can definitely access the internet on our guest laptop once we've completed our configuration for PAT on our ASA firewall. In this video, we're going to configure another NAT rule on our ASA firewall, but for the following scenario. So in our environment, we will have our DMZ, and we know that DMZ will be configured as a VLAN extended up to our ASA firewall. Well, within that DMZ, we're going to have 3 web servers running 3 different types of ports that will be used for our NAT and our firewall configuration. This video is focused on the first web server in our environment. So what are we going to configure? We're going to configure a NAT port redirect for a single port that will redirect to our web server on port number 80, but using the IP address configured on the WAN interface. So here's a possible situation that could occur. Let's say that we have a DNS entry created for web01.routehub.com. Well, that actually is using the public IP address that's configured on our WAN interface. Well, anyone who uses that domain name for port 80, like they put that into their web browser, and it will hit the firewall, it will automatically redirect them to web server 1. So how do we set this up? So this will yet again be another network object that we will add on our ASA firewall. So we can simply go to add network object. We'll call this DMZ-web01 TRA. For the type, we'll select host, and we'll put the IP address of our web server 1. Great. Now we'll extend NAT. We will enable that. The type will be static, which is here. And for the translated address, we will click here and select the WAN interface to use that IP address that's configured. Now we'll go to advanced. This is where we're going to get down to the port redirect configuration. Here, we're going to specify the source of being our DMZ, since basically our DMZ server, our web server, is in the DMZ. And of course, talking out to the WAN interface. And we know that port 80 is TCP, so that is the protocol we will use. And for the row and map port, we will select or input 80. And we're done. We'll say OK. OK again. We can go ahead and apply the changes and of course save. So basically, this is how you can configure NAT port redirect for a single port to a server on your network. In this video, we're going to set up another Nat rule, but this is where things are going to get a little different and will not involve, well, not entirely, with a network object. This is where we're going to add an actual Nat rule or twice Nat. So here's the situation. We're going to focus now on web server 2, but this time we want to redirect more than one port, port 8080 and the RDP port of 3389. Well, doing that, unfortunately, we cannot use the network object. We can only specify one port number within that particular object. So we need to use the actual NAT rule option for that configuration. So once again, let's set up the scenario. So web server number 2, and we'll use the IP address that is configured on our WAN interface. So let's say that we have another DNS entry for web02.routehub.com. That's using, again, the same IP address configured on our WAN interface. So if somebody connects to that using port 8080 or for RDP, doing that, it will hit the firewall and will have a redirect for either of those ports directly to web server 2. So let's get started with that configuration. There's a little bit more to do here compared to the other videos. So first, we need to definitely add a very simple network object. So for the name, we're going to call this DMZ Web02 TRA. And we'll input the IP address of that server. Great. And remember, nothing will be done here. Put that back and let's say OK. Now we'll go over here towards the middle. We're going to say add, and we're going to select the first option, which is add NAT rule before the network object NAT rules. This is very important. So basically, we need to check that. And now let's start doing the NAT rule configurations. A lot of different options here. So let's get started. First is the original packet. We need to specify the actual source interface. This is basically where our server is located. Well, it's located behind the DMZ interface. Let's check that. Now for the source address, we're going to basically select web server 2, which is here. Next, we know that this will be communicating out to the internet, which means out towards the WAN interface. The destination address is basically any IP on the internet. And for the source, or for the service, this will basically be our 8080 and our RDP. But we need to basically do this 2 times. First, we're going to focus on RDP. So how do we do that? We're going to click here, and we're going to go to add a service object. Now this will be used only for NAT, by the way. So we'll call this NAT-RDP. Protocol for that is TCP, so that's basically the default. And for the source port, we're going to put in 3389. Okay, do not put that for destination port. It's not going to work. We even tried it. It does not work. So make sure that port number is listed for the source port. Once we're done with that, we click on OK. Now let's add another service object for the other port. Oops, we'll call this NAT-8080. Great. And we'll put the port number for source. Great. Now both are added. Let's select our RDP service here and say OK. Now that it's selected for the service. Now for the translated packet. Now this will be static for the type, and for the source address, we're going to select our WAN interface because we want to use that IP for basically redirecting port 8080 and RDP requests to web server 2. So we're going to click on OK. And everything else we left at the default, so we're done. Say OK. Now let's add another NAT rule for 8080. So source interface, DMZ, talking out of the WAN interface. We're going to select our web server 2. Any destination. Our service, we're going to select 8080 this time. And for the translated packet, it will be static, and the source address will be our WAN interface. We want to use that IP. Everything else, we're done. So we'll say OK. Let's apply the changes and save. So basically, this is how you can configure NAT port redirect for redirecting multiple ports to a single server in your environment. In this video, we're going to set up another Nat rule for a static Nat translation, but using a different public IP address. So this will be another network object. So we do not need to do another Nat rule or twice Nat this time. So this will be another simplified configuration. So once again, let's set up our environment. So we have web server number 3, which will be listening on a different port number, okay? But we don't care about the port numbers this time. What we're going to do is we're going to specify a new public IP address that's going to be mapped to web server number 3. So how do we set up a static one-to-one NAT translation on the firewall? So we can do that by again going to add, going to network object. We're going to input the name of DMZ-web03 TRA, host, and the IP for that server. Next, we will extend down NAT. We will enable that. This will be static. And for the translated address, we were not going to select the WAN interface this time. We're going to input the new public IP. Oops, if we can remember what that IP address is. Let's get our notes for that. 251, I think. Great. So once we're done, we click on OK. Let's apply. And basically we're done. Let's just save as well. So this is how you can configure a static one-to-one NAT translation on the ASA firewall. Very easy stuff.